This is Jill Pack with the Seasons of Joy podcast. This is episode number 143, entitled Being Your Own Best Friend, Part 3, Getting to Know You. Are you a woman of faith who is struggling to navigate your current season of life? Do you feel like life is just happening to you instead of for you? My name is Jill Pack, and I'm a certified faith-based life coach and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I want you to know that no matter your season or your circumstance, it is possible to create a more joyful life, and I would love to show you how. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, my friends. Welcome to part 3 of the Being Your Own Best Friend series. In our previous episode, we explored self-compassion and self-forgiveness, two foundational principles for building a stronger relationship with yourself. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode yet, I encourage you to give it a listen. Today, we're diving into the art of getting to know yourself more deeply through understanding your needs, your values, and your boundaries. Think about your closest relationships. These relationships developed because you invested the time to get to know those people. Paying attention to what they like and dislike, learning what makes them tick, building a friendship with yourself requires the same dedication. So self-discovery might include setting aside time for self-reflection through journaling, meditation, or quiet contemplation. It might look like connecting with your body and the signals it's giving you. It might look like learning about your personality through tools like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs. It might look like exploring activities that bring you joy, including trying new things. Paying attention to what affects your energy and mood. Or noticing patterns in your relationships, both healthy and unhealthy. And finally, discovering your core needs, values, and boundaries. This last point is where I want to focus today. As you begin this journey of getting to know yourself better, please approach yourself with compassionate curiosity rather than judgment. Remember that getting to know yourself isn't some destination, but an ongoing process. You'll continue to discover new aspects of yourself throughout your life as you grow and you change during the different seasons of your life. So let's begin with honoring your needs. Your needs aren't just fluff or optional extras. They're essential requirements for your well-being. Learning to recognize and honor them is a fundamental act of this self-friendship we're trying to grow. So let's take a look at different ways that you could begin to discover your needs. Number 1, listening to your body. Your body communicates with you constantly through physical sensations, energy levels, and emotional states. The wisdom that you gain from paying attention to your body is often more reliable than intellectual reasoning about what you should need. So my invitation to you is to practice noticing those subtle cues, especially before they become overwhelming demands. It could look like this. A slight headache might come on, and this might be dehydration speaking. Or you're irritable. This might signal hunger or fatigue. Or maybe you're experiencing brain fog, and this might indicate a need for fresh air or movement. I know for me that's the case. So what do? We want to create some awareness practices in our life. This could include developing habits that keep you connected to your needs. It could be scheduling brief check-ins throughout your day and asking questions like, how am I feeling right now? And what might I need in this moment? Or it could be setting gentle reminders on your phone with questions like, what do I need? Or how's my energy? Or before making any decisions, pause to consider what your body and mind are asking for. For me, when I begin to feel an elevated emotion like stress, overwhelm, or anxiety, I give myself permission to pause and process the emotion before I jump into solving what I believe is the problem. This pause allows me to create space and grace for myself to regulate my nervous system and to bring my higher brain back online so that I can take any action that I'm going to take from a more regulated state instead of from a place of stress, overwhelm, or anxiety. The pause allows me to usually see the problem isn't as big as I'm making it to be. And then I can use my agency in that moment to be more intentional in that situation. But it does require me to meet my need of just settling my nervous system down so I can think more clearly. We also want to look at distinguishing our needs from our wants. Needs are essential for our well-being. Things like adequate sleep, nourishment, safety, connection. While wants are preferences that enhance life but aren't necessarily for functioning. Learning the distinction helps us to prioritize what truly requires our attention. So when feeling overwhelmed by these competing demands, I can ask myself, you can ask yourself, is this essential for my well-being right now? That is so important because it allows us to slow down. Like I always teach, that pause allows us to slow down and really get clear on what the issue is. So here are some examples between a need and a want. Let's say we're looking at sleep versus rest. The need might be getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep so that we can maintain our basic cognitive function and health, right? There's research that shows we need a certain amount of sleep to function at our best. Now, there are nuances to how much each person needs, but as a general rule, we have this guideline of 7 to 8 hours of sleep, right? But a want might be something like sleeping in until 10 a.m. on weekends or buying this really nice mattress, right? There's a difference between what is required for our well-being and what's a want. Maybe let's look at our nourishment. A need might be regular nutritious meals that provide essential nutrients, where a want might be dining at an expensive restaurant or having gourmet coffee daily. Maybe safety. Our need might be to secure housing with basic utilities and protection from harm. But a want might be living in an upscale neighborhood or having the latest security system. What about connection? The need might be meaningful relationships that provide emotional support for ourselves. But the want might be having this large social circle or receiving constant validation on social media. Maybe financial security. The need might be sufficient income to cover basic living expenses, where a want might be the latest smartphone, designer clothes, or luxury vacations. When applying, is this essential for my well-being right now question, there's some things we want to look at. A parent might realize they need to decline overtime to be present for their family dinner, meeting connection needs, even if it means postponing a vacation, which is a want. Or a student might prioritize getting adequate sleep before an exam, which is the need, rather than attending a social event, which is a want. A professional feeling burned out might recognize that their need for rest supersedes their want to complete non-urgent work projects. Or someone on a tight budget might distinguish between needed groceries and wanted entertainment subscriptions. These are just a few examples, but this is something I invite you to spend time deciding for yourself what your needs are. Are you viewing wants as needs or vice versa? Sometimes we view needs as a want, and so then we aren't taking care of ourselves. So this leads me to the other part of this is identifying your non-negotiables. What are those absolute essentials that keep you functioning at your best? And again, they are different for all of us. We want to spend time to really get curious and understand what these are for ourselves. Some of those might include a minimum hours of sleep, right? What is the minimum hours that we need to sleep a night? Maybe regular movement or exercise. What is that for you? What's your minimum movement that fills that need for you? What about time in nature? Is that something that's non-negotiable? Is it something you want to schedule in your day? Creative expression. Is this something that helps you to be your best? Or quiet time alone? What are those things that you want to be non-negotiable, that help you function at your best? And make a list of these non-negotiables and review it and look at it. And how can you remind yourself to protect these essentials when life gets busy? What can you do? What can you put in place to make sure you're meeting those non-negotiables? I know that for me, movement and time in nature are very important to my well-being. Being able to move my body, connecting with myself, others, and God in nature helps me to meet my needs of care, connection, and peace. These are non-negotiables for me. It's important to me to prioritize time for those things in my day because I know that I function better when I do. So let's look at how we can do that. Maybe it includes building buffers into your schedule instead of blocking yourself solid. I know this is something that I have struggled with. I'm getting better at. But we do live in a society of productivity and accomplishment, so it's easy to overschedule ourselves. So it might look like building buffers in your schedule to create space for some of those other things. It could look like preparing for need fulfillment by keeping supplies handy, right? Maybe you want to keep a water bottle with you and healthy snacks in your car, comfortable shoes for walking when you have a break. What can you prepare for ahead of time so that you can meet those needs? It might look like communicating your needs clearly to others rather than hoping that they'll notice, right? And I know for me, that's the case. I communicate that I need to go for a walk. I need to get out and move. And I let my husband know that. And he knows it's important to me. It's very clear. And the same goes with him. There are certain things that he needs to function at his best. And so when we can communicate that with each other, we have a higher chance of getting that done or making time for those things. It can also look like tracking patterns in your well-being by noticing things, by noticing when you feel the most centered versus depleted. What's going on around you or in your life during those times? When you're depleted, is it because you're overscheduled? Or when you feel more centered, is it because you've created space in your schedule? So just notice that and track patterns that you see in your own life. And it can also look like addressing any resistance to self-care by examining limiting beliefs, right? You might have a limiting belief like, I don't deserve ... It might be rest or getting outside or being creative, right? Or this idea that there's not enough time. Right? What belief are you holding on to that's preventing you from meeting some of those needs that you've neglected for a while? When you can constantly honor your needs, you actually develop a trusting relationship with yourself. This trust becomes your foundation for authentic living and genuine connections with yourself and others. Far from being selfish, this practice ensures you have the resources to show up fully in all areas of your life. And I mentioned this in the other podcast of this series is we can give from our overflow instead of from our reserve. So our needs are just one area that we look at to get to know ourselves. Another area is discovering our values. Values are your internal compass. They guide your decisions, your priorities, and your sense of purpose. Unlike goals that can be achieved, values are ongoing priorities that direct how you move and navigate through life. Some examples might be creativity, connection, learning, adventure, stability, or service, right? What are those for you? I have worked with clients to help them discover these values. And sometimes when we're in midlife, we've kind of lost sight of some of those values. I think we operate from many of them because they're part of us. They're ingrained in us, but sometimes we have this conflict and we don't realize why. And oftentimes it's because we aren't in alignment. We're not living in an alignment with those values that are important to us. We've lost sight of them. And so we want to take time to discover those, because living in alignment with your values creates a sense of integrity and purpose. When your actions match your values, you feel energized and satisfied. And the opposite happens. When making choices that conflict with your values, you often experience discomfort or the sense that something is off. So how do we begin uncovering your core values? There's a lot of different ways you can do it that can help you identify what really matters to you. One place to start is taking time to reflect on some of those amazing experiences, those peak experiences that you've had. Think about times when you felt the most alive and fulfilled. What made these moments so meaningful to you? What was it that made it feel so good? Another way is to notice what upsets you. Strong emotional reactions often indicate a violated value. I'm going to touch on that a little more in a minute. Another way is to consider your heroes. Who are those people that you admire and look up to the most often? And what qualities do they embody that you value? Another way is to examine how you spend your money and your time. Where you invest your resources reveals what you truly prioritize. So those are just 4 ways that you can begin to uncover your core values. So here's an exercise that I often have my clients do. I encourage them to go online, and I even have a paper that I share with them, but you can go online and you can just type in values. And then you begin kind of picking out the ones that you identify with. And I encourage people to kind of look at 10, right? Find 10 values that really resonate with you the most, and then narrow it down to maybe 5 or 3. You can keep all 10, but it's just really good. You want to really identify the things that really feel important to you. Or you could complete the sentence, I'm at my best when, and then you fill in the blank. And you do that a few times and you look at that. When is it that you feel the best? What is a value that corresponds with that? Or imagine your ideal day and analyze what elements make it satisfying, right? So there's a few different ways you can do this. Oftentimes, I just have people look at values and then just really notice those ones that jump out to you and just feel right to you. And so once you've identified your potential values, you want to get some more understanding. And for each value, you might ask yourself, what does this look like on the day-to-day, right? How has it shown up in the past in my life? Or can I envision what it would look like if I lived from this value fully, and what would change if I did, right? Those are really good questions to consider as you get a deeper understanding of your core values. The real work comes in aligning your daily life with these values, using them as guiding principles to create a life that feels meaningful and authentic to you. I remember when I did this exercise years ago, one of the questions I asked myself around a relationship I was struggling with at the time was, what value does this situation reveal to you? right? For me, the reason that this particular situation was so difficult for me was because I value connection and peace. And this situation was bumping against those values. It gave me a chance to pause and really consider why those values were important to me and that they were even values that were important to me, right? Understanding that this situation was pushing up against some values that maybe I hadn't recognized and why this situation felt so hard. It also allowed me to really get curious about how I could start making decisions in relation to this situation from those values, right? I couldn't change the other person in this situation, but I could decide on purpose how best to live in alignment with my values, regardless of how the other person chose to behave or show up in that relationship. And maybe, just maybe, because I'm beginning to make decisions and choices based on those values, I could actually have an influence on the other person, right? But it's by working on myself, not trying to change them, just living in more alignment with myself so that I could have a greater influence. And maybe they would change, maybe they wouldn't. In this situation, it did affect the relationship. It affected the way I showed up in that relationship, which invited the other person to show up differently too, but not from a place of force or requirement, just as a natural evolution of this relationship. And finally, setting healthy boundaries. This is so important. Once we understand our values and our needs, and I would even add our want, we want to be able to set boundaries to protect them, right? And we do this, right, through healthy boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls that keep others out, but rather guidelines that define what's acceptable to you. I remember hearing someone once describe how our life, the values, our needs, and again, I think we could add wants in here, were like this beautiful garden, right? Our little spot in the universe, a place where we are responsible for taking good care, right? Our garden. And each of our gardens have a gate. And we get to decide how far someone gets to come in to our garden. And we do this with boundaries, and we can do it with kindness. Boundaries doesn't mean manipulation or trying to make somebody be something or do something. It's just creating boundaries for our garden, what we will allow into our garden. So what kind of boundaries are there, right? We have physical boundaries. There's personal space, touch preferences, privacy needs. We have emotional boundaries, protecting our feelings, separating other people's emotions from our own. We have time boundaries, how we allocate our limited hours and energy. We have mental boundaries, safeguarding our thoughts, our opinions, and our beliefs. And we have digital boundaries. We live in a time of digital life, a digital life. And so we want to be able to manage our online availability and the information we're sharing. Now that we've spent some time talking about the different types of boundaries there are, let's look at how do we recognize that we might have a boundary issue or that we might need to create a stronger boundary. Well, we can discover that by paying attention to a few things. One of the first ways I think that's easy to see if we need a boundary is if we have feelings such as resentment, exhaustion, or feeling taken advantage of. When we experience feelings like that, it's often telling us that a boundary might need to be put in place. Maybe you notice yourself saying yes when you want to say no. Or maybe you've noticed a pattern of regularly overcommitting yourself. Maybe you're abandoning your priorities for other people's priorities. Maybe you're absorbing other people's emotions and taking them on as your responsibility. So I want you to take a minute and think about your life's garden. Do you see any of these signs or weeds popping up in your garden? If so, it's probably time to set some healthy boundaries. So, how do we create effective boundaries? First, we want to identify our limits. We want to reflect on those situations that leave us feeling drained or resentful. And then we want to check in and connect with our values. Asking ourselves, what do I want to make space for in my life? How can I live in more alignment with my values? And third, we want to recognize those warning signals, right? We want to notice, are there physical sensations or emotional states that are indicating a boundary is being crossed? We want to make sure that we use clear and direct language, such as, I won't be checking my email after 7 p.m. That is way more clearer than I try not to work evenings, right? Can you see the vagueness in the second example? We also want to remember to keep our boundaries simple. We don't need to over-explain or apologize for our boundaries. We also want to be consistent. When we are inconsistent with enforcing our boundaries, this actually teaches other people that they can push past our limits, right? After enough time, they might get us to move a little bit on our boundary. So let's look at what a practice of boundary building would look like. When we keep those things in mind, right? Identifying our limits, connecting with our values, we're paying attention and recognizing some warning signals, using our direct, clear language. Make sure that we are using I statements. That's one I left out. We might want to phrase it in a way that's, I need alone time to recharge, versus you're always demanding my attention. Can you see the difference there? We also want to keep them simple. We don't want to over-explain, but we also want to be consistent. So how do we build this practice of creating better boundaries? One, let's start with smaller boundaries before we take on a big, challenging one, right? Let's prepare that there's going to be pushback from others. People are used to us showing up a certain way in our relationships, and so there might be some pushback. Let's prepare for that. Then let's develop some scripts for common situations. Let's plan ahead for what we could say in those situations, such as, thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not taking on new commitments right now. It's clear, it's simple, and we don't have to over-explain it, right? It's about what you are willing to do. You've created a boundary from a kind place. We also want to remember that the short-term discomfort, right? That time that we are placing a boundary is going to be a little uncomfortable because we're not used to it. But that short-term discomfort actually leads to greater respect and authenticity. People know that we're being honest with them and open. And then as we struggle through this process, which it's going to be hard because up until this point, maybe you haven't been very good at setting boundaries. So during this whole process, we want to make sure that we practice self-compassion as we struggle with this. I've noticed a pattern in my life. Many times in my life, I would often say yes to other people or to commitments that I didn't really want to say yes to. But it was because I was afraid of disappointing others or that someone might just not like me, right? I wanted to please them because I value connection, belonging, and peace. So it makes sense that I would do that, right? However, by overcommitting or disregarding my other needs, I created the exact opposite of what I wanted and needed: disconnection and resentment. It has taken me some time, but I have come to better understand the beauty of kind boundaries. I think the kindest thing we can do for people is to have healthy boundaries. Being honest with myself and others actually creates greater connection, greater belonging, and greater peace in my life. So when you consistently set healthy boundaries, you honor both yourself and others by being authentic about your needs and your limitations. your humanness, right? This creates relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or resentment. So when you clearly identify your needs, your values, your boundaries, you free yourself from trying to control other people to feel better. Instead of waiting for someone else to meet your needs, you take charge of your own well-being. This awareness transforms your life. I promise you. You stop merely reacting to circumstances and you start making intentional choices about what truly matters to you. You become the author of your own story by focusing your energy on what brings fulfillment, while at the same time protecting those priorities with healthy boundaries. This shift doesn't just protect you. It creates more genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than unspoken expectations. You move from depending on others for your happiness to creating it yourself. As we close today's conversation, I want to highlight how these concepts, understanding our needs, recognizing our values, and establishing healthy boundaries, form a powerful triangle of self-awareness that can transform our lives and our relationship with ourselves. When we clearly distinguish between our essential needs and our optional wants, we're actually doing the foundational work of self-knowledge. This clarity helps us discover our core values, what matters most to us beneath the surface noise of our daily life. And when our values come into focus, we gain the conviction necessary to establish and maintain those important and vital boundaries that protect our well-being. Think of it this way. Our needs tell us what's essential. Our values tell us what's meaningful, and our boundaries ensure we honor both. This is how we create a life of integrity, where our outer actions align with our inner truth. The magic happens when these elements work together. By honoring our needs for rest, you're valuing your health and setting healthy boundaries around your time. By prioritizing genuine connection, you're valuing authenticity and setting boundaries around the relationships you nurture. Each reinforces the others in a continual cycle of growth. So the next time you find yourself overwhelmed or pulled in too many directions, pause and return to this triangle. Ask yourself, what do I truly need right now? What values am I honoring by meeting this need? And what boundary must I maintain to protect what matters most? This practice isn't about just saying no. It's about saying yes to a life that reflects your deepest values and truth. Because when our needs and values and boundaries align, we don't just survive, right? We thrive. We begin creating a life we love. We begin experiencing a joyful life, no matter our season or circumstance. Thank you so much for being here today. Until next time, remember that understanding your needs, honoring your values, and setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's the most profound form of self-respect. Thank you for tuning in to the Seasons of Joy podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends and family. If you want to learn more about me or how to work with me, just visit my website, www.seasons-coaching.com, and have a joyful week.